So welcome everybody. Thank you for being here tonight. My name is Hannah Schutz and I'm one of 4 counselors at Sehome. And we're going to do introductions in just a minute, but I just wanted to do a couple little and kind of nuts and bolts. So we are recording tonight. So for those of you who we had got some emails from families that couldn't join tonight. So just know that we'll be emailing this out after. So if your Wi-Fi starts to get glitchy or you need to attend to something with your family, just know that you'll get the full recording at the end of the evening or in the next couple days. Looks like the chat is working, and I don't know, the Q&A should also be working. The chat, I believe, is going just to panelists, and we'll try to monitor that. Those that aren't presenting will just keep an eye on the chat or the Q&A and answer questions as they come up, or if there's something that we're going to be addressing later, just know that we might be getting to it. So if we don't answer right away, it might be because it's coming up in the presentation, but we'll try to get to everyone's questions by the end and leave a little time at the end for that. So as part of introductions, we thought it would be, we were just chatting earlier about, helping students with their post-high school plans. And we were reflecting on our pathways to be at the point where we are as school counselors and how we each have different pathways in getting here. So we thought we'd just introduce ourselves by giving a quick, try and keep it like under a minute synopsis of how we got to school counseling, just because I think it's something that we like to reflect on with students, that everyone's path to their endpoint is different. And there's so many great ways to get to that point. So my pathway, I graduated from Mount Vernon High School. I actually took a gap year and I spent the year in Portugal, living with some family friends, and I helped tutor their youngest son, as a Canadian friends of ours, so they're English speaking, tutoring their youngest son. I had deferred my college admission, so when I returned, I went to UC Davis for undergrad. And I ended up doing a 5-year plan because I changed my majors a few times. I went in as a pre-vet student. I ended up graduating as exercise science, exercise physiology. And after that, I took a couple years where I worked, and in the process, did some jobs leading outdoor adventure travel trips with teenagers and really loved that work. And also followed my husband to he was doing a teaching degree, so I ended up coming into education kind of in a side route, job shadowed as a school counselor, and ended up back at Western for my master's degree. So that's my little story to where I got here, how I got here. Pass the baton.
Awesome. I'm Amy Gels, and I'm school counselor for students with last names A through G. And I too switched my major 10 times, Hannah. I know we've talked about this a little bit, but it just seems like more and more that's becoming more common. But graduated from Burlington Edison High School. I went directly to WSU in Pullman and did 4 years there. Similarly, I wanted to be a news anchor, and then I switched to civil engineering and then construction management, and then finally did some volunteer work and really enjoyed psychology. So did some research there and was on the 5-year plan. Went to WSU Vancouver to finish and get a second bachelor's in sociology, and then started working in a variety of community and social work programs. I worked mostly with older adults, but then got to work with some high school students, teaching them how to work with older adults in the medical community, and just loved it. And so did also some work in Seattle as a camp counselor, and then did a little soul searching and came back home and actually went to Western for their mental health counseling program, saw how much fun the school counselors were having, and was like switching. And then just moving on across the street. So.
Nice. Hi everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm John Vandermolen, and I have the last names starting N through Z. And my story, I graduated from Sehome High School, so I'm a proud alumni. and had a great experience at Sehome. And I still remember applying only to 2 schools, Western up the street and University of Washington, and ended up going to University of Washington. I don't think I would get in now. It's kind of a joke now, but had a great experience there. I studied journalism, thinking I was going to go into journalism and do editorial journalism. And then when I graduated, kind of found out lifestyle-wise that didn't totally fit. So I was then decided on law school, started working for a law firm, applied to law schools, and then started coaching kids and working like through a court-appointed advocate program with teenage youth. And that just kind of made me realize I wanted to work with kids. So then I went to Seattle University for my master's, and now I have the greatest job ever. And the one cool thing, which I think is relevant to tonight, was attending like a big public university and then attending a small private university, and we'll kind of get into that later. But it really gave me a good perspective to kind of work with students too, because we all have our stories and our perspectives, which I think is really valuable. So anyway, that's my story. Thank you guys.
PowerPoint will show, and again, we'll send out the recording. We'll also post the PowerPoint. So if you want any of these links, you'll have them after, so you don't need to worry about writing anything down. So Mike, kudos here too, behind the scenes, one of our wonderful admin who has been such a great support to us as we go through these webinars throughout the year. He's got some tech skills and we always appreciate him being here. So thanks, Mike. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide. So first of all, before we just reflect on this one, we just wanted to acknowledge as counselors that this has been a year that has straddled 2 school years. And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't acknowledge that to you as parents and to any students that are out there, to say that we know that this has not been easy. It's not been anything that we were prepared for. And we know that it happened in the spring of 10th grade for this class and then has been going on through junior year. And so, you're not alone. And this is something that is shared, nationally and internationally, but it is something that we wanted to just put out there in the front to say that it has caused additional stress and I think a lot of questions, potentially some silver linings for some students as they reflect on what's really important to them and thinking about their future. And I know families have had some great conversations, but we just wanted to say that at the beginning of this presentation. So here are just some thoughts of ways to engage with your student. We know that some parents have already, are having conversations with students. Some students don't want to have conversations about their post-high school plans right now because they're feeling really anxious. Some parents feel really equipped for that and have maybe a child that's going down a similar route than that they went through. We know that some parents have children that are going on a totally different path and they may not know how to sort of help them along the way. But what we want to say is that you can definitely be a sounding board no matter what. And there's tons of great resources and people to help with some of the specific planning for your student. But here's some thoughts we just put up there, helping with conversations, especially open-ended ones about how you're feeling right now. And how can I help? Parents can be consultants in the sense that you have some adult skills that can be really helpful for your child. So remembering that sometimes helping to offer with a timeline or helping with organization. There's some great tours. Colleges have really had to up their game as far as virtual college tours. And some people are hitting the road for some tours now that things are beginning to open up. So helping support with those logistical pieces and being aware of the pressure that students often feel in junior year about their post-high school plans. Some families have found it really helpful to set up a time, maybe once a week or every other week to check in. So it's not a trapped in the car on the way home from soccer practice conversation that's happening over and over again. But also that your student knows that you are going to be there throughout the process and you can continue to check in. We also put the money talk on there. We have a lot of students who are really knowledgeable and conscientious about their family's finances. And of course, this is a personal decision about having that talk, but we know that the reality is that many decisions around college are based in that financial piece, and some of that information comes out once students are accepted. So having that talk often up front and being realistic about it as a family can help with some, negate some of the stresses that come once decisions are on the table and you're having to make that, you're making that college decision. One other piece we just wanted to put on there, a note I missed, is that we really believe that college there's no perfect college. There's so many great schools out there for your student. And I think sometimes students feel like there's this perfect college that's going to be this prize that you win, and then you get this sort of, award in the sense of like it was this perfect fit. And we know that there's lots of great colleges out there. And so we want to take a little of that pressure off to say that much of it is, you make a decision with the most information that you have in that moment in time. And then a lot of it comes out of the experience that your student has at that school. So anything else, Amy or John, you want to add?
I guess the one thing I just wanted to reemphasize is like, that I try and tell students all the time is like, everyone's at a different place and wherever you're at is totally fine. So focus kind of on your own path and journey, and whatever kind of where that takes you and the time it takes is the key, and try and, because there's always people around who are either, really motivated or kind of know, and then there's other people that are kind of like just need more time to kind of process and have those conversations and search. So that's kind of, I think, a big thing too.
Yeah, we've definitely seen that with this year. It has had some conversations with parents about that and their students, and feeling like they do need more time, partly because of this unique year that we've had. Yeah. So, okay, next slide, please. So we put up, we have seen students doing all of these options after high school. We're going to touch on many of these. We will spend some time on four-year college admissions and some updates and trends around testing and things like that, because some of those are more time specific. And we want to acknowledge we have students doing all of these and thriving in all of these different areas. So we just wanted to put up, this is sort of just a snapshot of what our students are doing after they graduate from Sehome. Okay, so where are we with our juniors? So all juniors will be sent an email with information and resources on how to get started. So we'll post this PowerPoint for anyone who wants to see it, but we also will be sending out emails to our juniors with some resources for all of those different options that we just posted, post-high school options. So we talked about, this is a great time to have that conversation if you're not already having it, just to see what kind of questions or needs your student has. And then you can certainly reach out to us as a starting point, and we can help point you in some direction of resources or have a conversation with you and your student. We're always happy to do that. And then the week of April 26th, we're going to devote time in the afternoons during asynchronous time to allow juniors to schedule. We're going to use bookings to have students be able to choose times to meet with us one-on-one. This is optional, but we'd love an opportunity to meet with students who want to do that one-on-one. We typically do that in the spring. We'll be doing that likely remotely, although if students are in building and would like to come see us, we can talk about that option too. Okay, so I'm going to just fly through some of these, but we wanted to put up some terminology just because these are terms that you might hear. Some of it we'll be addressing later in the presentation, but they're terms that you might hear floating around post-high school planning. So we just wanted to put up some of those, like AccuPlacer, which is a placement test for many two-year colleges. FAFSA, which we're going to talk more about financial aid later, is the free application for federal student aid that opens October 1st and is open to all students. I'm getting my internet is unstable message, so hopefully I don't freeze up here. SAT, ACT admission tests we put some for your universities because we will talk about testing optional and test free or test blind schools later. And the Western Undergraduate Exchange, the WUI, is a consortium of states that have a shared a reciprocity agreement around tuition, where students that are part of those 16 states or territories can apply to another state, certain list of colleges, and pay in-state tuition plus 50%. So it can be a big cost savings for families. Common App and Coalition, along with SendEDU, these are all online platforms that universities use either for applications or for submitting documents. There isn't a need to know which application a college uses until students are ready to apply. They can, as they're getting their list together, they can start to inform themselves of which application the school uses. And the way they do that is by clicking Apply Now, and it's going to take them right to that application. So Common App and Coalition are shared applications that multiple schools may use, and students can submit the bulk of their application that way. And then early action versus early decision. Early action is an opportunity for students to apply early and hear back from schools early. Generally, those are application deadlines between November 1st, 15th, December 1st, and often students will hear back by the new year. And so that's a benefit for them potentially to hear back early so they can either make a decision or decide about applying to other schools. The challenge is, of course, the deadline's earlier, so students need to have their ducks in a row and get their letters of rec and their essays done earlier and want to have those done well. Early decision is also an early application deadline, but it is a binding agreement that students would apply to only one college early decision, and if they are accepted, that they would commit to going to that institution. So it's, you know, a good option for a family who feels like they could afford that school if they got in, and that it's a school that the student really wants to go to, because that's the agreement that they're going into when they apply early decision.
Right. So as you can tell, a lot of what we'll be talking about today does revolve around a lot of the post-high school education, colleges and things like that, just because there is more like Hannah was saying, that is time sensitive. But you know, so as you're figuring out different options, different college options, the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about our apprenticeships and other workforce options. But attending a college fair, we really encourage students to get as much exposure as possible. And we know this past year has been extremely challenging to do so. A lot of our college fairs are virtual, and traditionally in the fall, we will have even reps from colleges come visit Sehome. But we are still finding ways, you know, so there are lots of ways that students can still connect and still do some searching. We have a few listed here of online college search options. And after I'm done with my section here, we'll actually do a quick tour of our website so I can show you some of these things. But the College Board has a big feature where you can filter through different colleges based on location or size of the college or major or things like that. CapEx has another great tool to do some searching. Colleges that change lives, if there are things that, you know, if your student wants a little more of a unique experience, or looking at some of the smaller schools that have really specific degrees and majors. Futures Northwest is an all-around just wonderful website. It's a local organization, and so everywhere from learning about the apprentices that are offered in Skagit and Whatcom County, to FAFSA information, to blogs and podcasts about how to write a really solid college essay. There's a ton of resources there, and we'll take a look at that in a minute. Taking advantage of tour days. So again, these are virtual, or they have been so far this year, through Bellingham Technical College, Whatcom Community College, and Skagit Valley College. We also, in the past, have done WAVE tours, which is done in Skagit County, where students would do hands-on projects for different trades through the apprenticeship programs. And we're still having those experiences, though they're just virtual. And we will be having college art visits at Sehome in the fall. Not sure if those will be virtual or in person yet, but In the fall, we always have local colleges come by and actually get the chance to talk one-on-one with our students. The campusreal.org is a great website to do the virtual online tour, and colleges have really upped their game in that area. So whereas before there were a select few colleges that had those online tours, there's a lot more happening now. The other thing we really encourage too is talking with teachers and people in their field of interest. So, you know, whether it's a friend's parent or an auntie or, you know, maybe an old coach or something, just really encouraging your students to have conversations with people that are doing things that they think are cool. We also will be hosting, I'll talk about this here in a second, an interest inventory. So if your student's thinking, you know, I'm not really sure, you know, I like every class in high school, or I like no class in high school, and I just really can't pinpoint, we'll have some opportunities coming up in the next few weeks for students to do some reflecting while they're here at school. So the next slide. So upcoming events for juniors to check out. We have all of these are listed on our Career Center as well. So we have a career fair that's coming up in April. The High School and Beyond Plan interest inventory that I was talking about. We'll actually have 2 opportunities for that this spring. There's a resume workshop also happening twice for students that are interested in going into the workforce now or after high school. There's another college fair for juniors in April, so that's hosted by Arrow, and of course there's some job fairs that will be happening as well. The Career Center, Martha Zender, she's our Career Center and High School and Beyond Plan specialist. She's an amazing resource also for students who are interested in pursuing a career in the military. If your student's interested in going to one of the academies, you know, there's a lot of requirements that are really, you know, similar to the 4-year universities that we've been talking about, in addition to some specific requirements, letters and things like that. So she's a great resource. We're great resources, but just, you know, encouraging your student to attend these, and we'll show you a few more on our website in a second. So next one. So really quick, so as you know, students are looking through their options and, you know, exploring their interests and going through all of that. Another thing that's really important to do around that same time is considering that money talk, that financial aid piece. So I'm going to talk about this briefly just to kind of plant some seeds. But a lot of this does happen once we get into senior year. There are a few scholarships that are available to juniors, and you can take a look at those on our website. But this really does happen really in senior year. So we have a Financial Aid 101 section on our website, and also Ready, Set, Grad is a great opportunity just to get an idea of what is financial aid, what does it mean. It describes the difference between the FAFSA and the opportunities for financial aid through the FAFSA, which include loans, which are monies that you would pay back, grants, which are monies that do not need to be paid back, and work study, which provides students with jobs on campus and some really cool jobs too. So you could be potentially working, maybe rubbing shoulders with a professor or working in the rec center, things like that, and get paid well to help with some college funds. We also, so that's sort of one area, the FAFSA, and learning about the eligibility based on income that your family can access through the federal government. And then there are also scholarships. And so there are a variety of scholarship opportunities. There are local scholarships, national scholarships, merit scholarships, and other scholarships that are available through specific universities. So that just sounds overwhelming to me, like just thinking about that. And when I sit with students and I talk about scholarships, it can just feel overwhelming. So we really encourage students to check out those 2 websites right there, the Washboard and Whatcom Dollars for Scholars. Both of them are matching sites. So instead of having to tease through every single, scholarship to see if you're eligible, you fill out one profile, and that will actually let you know, or let your student know, if they are eligible, and then they can apply right then and there. So really helps to narrow down scholarships. There are other ones too that we'll show on our website, but the WUI that Hannah had just spoken about, there are also other scholarships that are available through the institution that your student is going to. So merit-based scholarships often are based on a student's GPA and potentially SAT scores, depending on the school. There are also scholarship applications that are in addition to the admission application. And sometimes those are departmental, sometimes those are just for the university as a whole. And as I'm saying all this, we also talk with your students about this, and we will sit down and make sure that hey, okay, what school you're interested in most right now, and go through that website with them. We also have a lot of local scholarships on our website. So just under the scholarship tab, and there's a bulletin that's updated weekly. So that's kind of the quick and easy of the financial aid. But we have a ton of supports. So for financial literacy and help, the Futures Northwest that I was talking about earlier, they have events in the fall, and there's a few of them. So I would assume now that we've done a ton of this virtual work that they'll be recording, so it's not always on campus. Ready, Set, Grab, that's the Financial Aid 101, where there's just short little videos for families to get an idea of, what does that mean? What do I do after I fill out the FAFSA? How do I get the money transferred over to the school? And all that. There's a FAFSA forecaster, so even before filling it out, estimating how much you can get from federal aid. Also during those rep visits, we often will have, during their spiel, they'll talk about financial aid and opportunities at our specific schools. And also we just have a ton of great local partnerships with those offices. So often if they'll be at the filing events, but then also, they can answer questions just in general about financial aid. So yeah, lots of support at the district level. So with all of that, I want to give a quick tour of our website. So Mike, if I could share the screen quick. Okay. So let's pop on to the Sehome website. All right. Can you see that? Good. Okay. So so a lot of what we just talked about, it can be accessed right through our website. So on the sehome.bellinghamschools.org, up on the right-hand side, there's our counseling website. So on the front page, you'll find all of the different counselors that work with your student. Also some other staff that are in the student services area as well. And there's Martha Zender, who I was just talking about before. She works in the Career Center. So with all of our contact information. On the left-hand side, there's these different tabs, and we update these throughout the year. So ones that I wanted to show you right now, class of 2022. Right now, we just have these 2 webinars on there. So we will be updating this with this webinar, as well as these resources that we'll be sending out to you. But what I wanted to show you was the 2021. So these are our current seniors. And when your student starts their senior year, we will be doing senior meetings to make sure that we're going over all the details of their plans, making sure that whether it's college applications, like the FAFSA, military enlistment, career exploration, all of these things. We have information on transcripts if that's something that needs to be sent. This year we did a little bit more information on the 4-year college application, since there were some changes in that due to COVID, and then a lot of helpful links for students as they're navigating that. So this is something that you can expect your students will have access to. Obviously, they can look at it now if they wanted to. On the top, there are some quick links to those college fairs we talked about that they had this year. So over here, again, I'm clicking on this left-hand side to the Career Center. And this is where there's more information on those events. So this is the link to all of those events. There was one earlier today for the virtual technical and community colleges. There's a virtual Western US college fair coming up in April. The link will be there soon. But as you can see, you know, Montana State University, so that was one of those specific schools that come and wants to speak with our students. And traditionally in the fall, there's just a big long list of reps for students to talk to. So the Futures Northwest website, this one I really, really recommend. There are so many different resources. I like their, you know, talking about apprenticeships. A lot of students might not have heard about these, if, you know, the really cool opportunities to be paid while you're being trained. Some great links to understanding, you know, okay, what are the requirements for that? How do you apply to the program? And some search engines as to what apprenticeships are local, and or if your student is interested in moving away from home to do that, what kind of specific internships you can, or apprenticeships you can get out of the area. They also have, as I had mentioned, they have blogs and podcasts and YouTube videos, just things that are a lot more, I think, student friendly. So highly recommend that. The scholarships that we were talking about before, there's the websites here, our scholarship bulletin that's updated weekly, and then a little bit more information on the FAFSA and financial aid, and some tips for scholarships. The Financial Aid 101, there's little videos, like, you know, maybe 5-10 minutes, that discuss what is financial aid and step-by-step how to actually fill out the FAFSA. So all of this is on here. We update it as things arise. One of the search tools that I had mentioned earlier was the Big Future. So this link is in the PowerPoint that we'll send out, but it's a really nice search tool. So you can use all these different filters to be able to filter all of the colleges that are on the Big Future. Okay, I think I will go ahead. Anything else that John or Hannah that would be helpful for me to show on our website?
No.
I just think the college search piece, like, if there's so many colleges out there in the United States, and so some students have a hard time, like, where do I start? You know, some are very clear, like, I want to stay in these states, or but it can be overwhelming. So I think sometimes these can be fun to put in preferences, because you can kind of choose, like, I want to be in Washington, Oregon, or California, and I want to major in, you know, biology or you know, specific, and I want this size of college, and then it kind of pulls up, and you can put in even GPA if you want, and it'll pull up the colleges that kind of match that. And that's just one tool. Like, there's multiple other ones too, like there's College Navigator and Niche and Niche and other ones, but it can be a good place if students just want a place to start and kind of explore around. So
one thing I wanted to make sure I shared was this college comparison sheet, and I traditionally will send out something really similar to my students in an Excel form, because this is a lot of information to keep track of. So yeah, this is a nice one if your student wants to print it out and write on it. They can always contact me, or I believe it's on the senior website. We'll send it out with all of this information, but just to start tracking it now, some of the things such as, you know, you can compare the financial aid, you know, how much can you expect to get through merit aid, or do they require specific things? So, all right. And I saw there was a question about specific resources about attending school in Canada. And I don't know if we have anything specifically on there for Canada, but that would be a great conversation for your student to check in with their counselor, and we can support them in looking up that specific information for the school they're interested in.
We also have a lot of Canadian schools typically visit, and so this fall will be interesting to see if that's in person or over Zoom, but we have some good representation of college reps that do come down from Canada and really enjoy talking with students. So there's some good opportunities in the fall to talk with reps from schools up, especially in the Vancouver Victoria area.
Okay, back to the Mike, if you don't mind bringing the PowerPoint back up.
Let's see.
Thank you.
We're on slide 12. Yes, here we go. So I know kind of one thing too, like when we talked about, there's so many schools out there. So part of it is like kind of it can be as stressful or, you know, stress-free as some students make it. And obviously some students have really high goals and they want to apply to a lot of schools, which is totally fine and great. You know, we support wherever students are at, and some others are like, I want to go to this school, or I might go to a community college and transfer, you know, so all options are great. We kind of say just for to keep it, you know, hopefully if you're doing a good research, then you should be able to keep the list in the single digits, because if you think about even in terms of application fees and then time spent on essays and filling out applications, that's just a good idea. 2 to 3 likely schools. So what we mean by that is like likely to get into. So they kind of fit profile wise, and basically like the admit rate for that school, you know, might be higher, not highly selective. So if you look at like in-state, it's going to vary, right, between University of Washington being like kind of the most highly selective in terms of public. And then if you were to like look, you're kind of like stair step in terms of getting into, and it has nothing to do with the quality of the school, as we know, because they're all quality schools. But then in terms of like Washington State or Western or Central or Eastern, then each place might have a different, basically kind of average. And some students, a good way you can look at like average GPA or average SAT, and a lot are going test optional. So now maybe average kind of SAT to or GPA to get an idea. So anyways, 2 to 3 that kind of you'd be likely to get into, just so they feel good and kind of aren't stretching themselves on too many of their schools. Every school should match your priorities. So I always tell students, hopefully you don't have like a backup school, like use that term where it's like, this is my backup, because hopefully every school on the list would be one you'd be excited to go to, and would kind of fit the things that are important to the student. Happy attending any of the schools. Considering the family's financial situation. So sometimes I know we get into like public schools are more affordable and private schools seem really expensive. And that can be true, but then there's also the financial aid package that come into play. So sometimes depending on the student, if they get a financial aid package from a private school, it can kind of lower it down into a range. And so I think the key is applying to schools that fit in terms of kind of financial range. But then if there's a couple that seem kind of fit the priorities of everything else, but you're a little worried about the money, you can still apply, see what the package comes out to, and then still make those decisions, because you kind of have that time to kind of evaluate after you get in and then see what the package is. And I think, like you said, collaboration. The one thing I would say is if you have a student who really wants to go somewhere and you're kind of, I've had this come up a couple times where the student's pushing hard to go somewhere and the parents kind of like a little anxious about them applying there due to the cost or whatever, or just I think sometimes like joining them with the idea, but then saying, well, if you get in here, this is what we can afford. And if it like ends up being above this amount, then we kind of would have to figure that out. You know, you'd have to get a job or you'd have to do it. So not completely cutting them off from maybe their dream of what that is, but kind of talking through what the option would look like if that was somewhere that they really considered. And again, just kind of, you know, having that discussion points all along the way, like Hannah said too, like kind of checking in as you go through the process. So in terms of 2-year colleges, which I think is important, we have a lot of great 2-year colleges in the state of Washington, and locally, Bellingham Technical College, Whatcom Community College, Skagit Valley Community College, all have great programs. I think in the changing times too, like I had a couple students, and obviously, during COVID, it's changed a bunch of different things, but I had some students that were planning to go away to different colleges, and they decided, you know what, I want to be in your home right now. I want to work and I want to go to a 2-year college, because it's less expensive and I can live at home. So these are things I think that are also changing and shifting in terms of people's approach and thinking in some ways. But anyways, this one website has all 34 community colleges in the state. You can also search by program in there. So every community college can kind of have its own kind of niche too, kind of like 4-year college in terms of stronger programs. And obviously, like Bellingham Technical College has the real hands-on programs and going right into like a trade or a specific program like nursing or welding or manufacturing, or I mean, there's a lot of great programs that you can go into and just get a job right after your 2-year degree. So, and again, SAT, ACT is not required for 2-year, no matter what. It's not even, so that's not, whereas 4-year, obviously some require it. We'll talk more about that. Registering for the math English placement exam, that would happen in the spring of senior year once a student decides they want to attend there. And some are done like more self-placement now too, depending on the classes you've taken or in high school or the grades you've gotten. And then I think the key piece is making an appointment, meeting with an advisor, because the key early on is, if I've told students, if you are going to go to a 2-year and your goal is to transfer to a 4-year, meet with someone right away and like kind of let them know what's on your mind, even if it might change, so you can kind of get the right classes like in those 2 years, and you're not having to go beyond 2 years. So let's see, 4-year college timeline. So just to give an idea, we just like to give kind of a visual picture. And again, we'll get into all this again, kind of fall of senior year. But just to kind of junior year in the spring, taking the SAT, ACT tests if needed. So it could be May or June at this point. There's also a July option for ACT and an August option for SAT, which we'll get to. And again, I've been real respectful to where students are at this year. So I've kind of said, if you don't have the time, space, energy right now to be thinking about that, that's totally fine. Just wait until, summer or even fall if you need to, just to kind of be aware of that piece, because some are just have had enough of extra things right now. So timeline of that. And then August, September is kind of when a lot of college applications for 4-year colleges go live. And so that's when students can start looking at them. And if they want to look at essay prompts, they can start, brainstorming and working on that piece. The FAFSA goes on the line in October. Then one thing I wanted to clarify really quickly is there's schools that have early application deadlines. So like University of Washington, the University of California schools, so their deadlines are just earlier. And then there's early action, early decision, which is kind of like a different early application program. So we'll get into that a little more, but I just want to mention that. Some people get confused with that. And then you have all the way till a lot of times, some schools you don't hear back from till like March, early April, and then May 1st is the date, kind of national decision day in terms of like if you haven't, a lot of students will decide earlier, but that's when kind of like, and then, I guess I skipped across the top, sorry. So in the fall, if students want to retake the SAT or ACT, they can. We also do senior meetings with the counselor a few weeks into senior year right away. We just like start meeting with them and getting those questions answered, helping them with the letter of rec process, like all the different things. And then you kind of see that some colleges will like reply with decisions pretty quickly, and then others will take longer. The early action, early decision, like Hannah said, you apply in November, you hear back in December. So there's strategy sometimes with that in terms of if that's a good decision. And then obviously graduation. Sorry, I kind of jumped across the top there. Let's see, application process. And again, I know right now we're kind of at the point where it's more the search. So But just to give a little preview of this, because so that way when you hear it again in September, the biggest thing, check application deadlines and requirements. All students with their high school diploma at Sehome will be set up to like attend a 4-year, just because you know, a 4-year, there's some 4-years that require, you know, additional things, but like some of the more highly selective ones, but you would have all the English and the math and the, you know, through meeting the high school graduation requirements. Applying online, most require an essay or personal statement, so that's something that is important. Ordering transcripts, so that'll be something we'll go over in the fall too, and students request online. Kendra Simpson is our counseling center administrative assistant, and she's awesome in terms of helping with that. And then sending ACT, SAT scores, that's something that a lot of schools will require to be sent directly from the testing agency. So that's just good for parents to know, like, so you do have to like go in and request to have those scores sent. I'll get into that a little more. And then letters of recommendation, if it's a common application school, a lot of common application schools, which are a lot of private schools, and not all, a lot of them require like 2 teachers and a counselor letter. So that's that's something, and I know again, it's going to be interesting this year. I was thinking about that with it being online and the hybrid, students might be a little worried, like, who am I going to ask to get a letter of rec? So I'll say 2 things to that, and also knowing us as counselors. One is we'll kind of help advise with that, but also like whether it's us or teachers, we have a process where we have students kind of through talking with them and then submitting some things to us, some questions and all the different things and gathering info. We set it up so we will be able to write like a great letter to help them. So that's kind of always our goal and the teacher's goal. So that's just a piece just to mention. And then some of the very highly selective schools or private schools might, might be smart to do college interviews. And those are like, if I'm thinking like Ivy League schools or Stanford or Duke or some of the schools that are very, more difficult to get into, then having a chance to do an interview just gives you it's an extra piece to help your application.
Really quick, John. Yeah, I just think the application requirements can be really similar for a lot of colleges, but they can also be really different. So that's where that worksheet of writing all these down with the deadlines is really important. In addition to interviews, some will have auditions or portfolios, or there's a fitness assessment for academies and things like that. So there's sometimes there's little key things that we can support your student in developing as they're applying. But just let us know if you have any questions about how to navigate those websites, or have your student reach out to us and we can walk through the admissions requirements with them.
Okay, so we just there's been a lot of questions around SAT, ACT, so college admission testing throughout this last year. And we know this is a long presentation, so I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, but we did want to give some updates because it's a really common question we're getting from juniors right now. So we won't be able to offer the PSAT this year to our juniors. This student class had the pre-ACT in the fall of 10th grade when we had that opportunity. So they have had that practice test. There is some great free prep through Khan Academy. I just looked at it recently. I think you can have 8 full-length SAT tests and free prep. So similar to what they would have if they took the PSAT, it links to Khan Academy after when they get the results. Anyone has access to that. You can sign up for free prep through Khan Academy. And then actually ACT prep there's free prep at act.org. So we always start with the free resources. Those are 2 good resources, act.org and Khan Academy for SAT. So a couple quick changes that College Board came forth around SAT is that they are no longer doing subject tests. And those have become, a trend has been declining in those because of how widespread AP testing has become. And so if you're not familiar with subject tests, you don't need to worry about that because they're discontinuing it. And not all colleges required it. Some of the most selective colleges did in the past. So that's no longer. The other piece is that after June, they're not offering the essay anymore for SAT. And that is just based on the fact that what they're hearing back from colleges and what they're seeing through applications is there's opportunities for students to demonstrate their writing in other ways. They did not feel like that was needed anymore as part of their exam. They're trying to streamline it for students. So those are two updates on SAT. Western hosted the March SAT, and on the next slide, we'll show you some dates for upcoming admission tests for students who do want to take that this spring. Thank you. So these are upcoming dates for SAT. Western is our closest test site. I predict these may be popular dates because the testing has been closed for so long. So if your student is interested in taking these, they can sign up now for these dates. The next one is coming up that's still open to register is May 8th. The deadlines are generally a month prior, but we encourage students to sign up early if they do want to get a test location close to us. So there's the May 8th, the June 5th, August 28th, and then you can see the ACT dates for June 12th and July 17th. And we would predict that they would have very regular testing in the fall to kind of make up for that lack of testing up until now for the last year. We have fee waivers available. Any student who, often the easiest indicator that students know is if they qualify for free or reduced lunch. We know that COVID has had a big financial impact on many families, so please reach out to us if there's any barriers with fees for SAT, ACT, or admission fees in the fall to colleges, and we can talk about that. Okay, so what's been interesting is without having SAT or ACT available this past year, a large majority amount of schools last year did not require SAT or ACT, and that trend is continuing for many colleges. So the test optional. Test blind is less colleges, but there's about 1,400 four-year accredited colleges right now that are test optional, which means that they feel confident that they can evaluate a student without a test, SAT or an ACT. Test optional means that they may consider it if you submit it. So if you are a strong test taker, it can benefit, but if you're a student who doesn't feel like the test supports their application in a positive way, then this is an opportunity for them if they are applying to a school that's test optional. The one piece we are noticing is that some schools are still using it for merit aid. And so that is something to consider for those test optional schools, and you can look for their policy on their admission page. There's I think about 70 colleges that are test blind, and there are some that are going to be piloting that. We have two in our UW, University of Washington, Seattle, and Wazoo, both are, UW is technically test optional because they will look at test scores for waitlisted students. Wazoo is going test blind for this upcoming year. And they have, I think if you can go to the next, oh, sorry, Mike. Can you go, I'm sorry, the fairtest.org, those websites are great resources. If you go there, you can see all the schools that are test optional and all the colleges that are test blind. And they keep that updated very regularly. So it's a great resource to check out schools. It will say on their website, but you can also go to this list and look at the colleges that you might be interested in, see where their policies live for the upcoming year and if that's continuing. So we just wanted to give two examples of public universities in our state that are what their testing policy is for the upcoming year for this fall of 2022 class. So Wazoo's board has recommended scores not be considered for merit scholarships, and UW is not using them for merit aid as well. So they are technically test optional, UW Seattle, because they may use it for waitlisted students. The UC system has also gone they're calling it test free, and they're not using that scores for admission or for merit aid as well. So there's some big changes happening that I think really address some equity issues that we've seen in the past and hopefully open up some opportunities for students in other ways with a more holistic admission process. Yeah, it is great news. Yeah. Okay.
So a couple of questions that came up in the Q&A I saw was one about timing of testing, like is it, would it be recommended to take it in the spring or wait and see kind of like if more colleges, kind of even more kind of add to the policy-wise change and don't require it for this class? And then I guess the other one is like how late to wait in the fall to be able to take it. And I think, I guess my thing is it kind of depends a little bit in terms of like on the attitude of, like, sometimes I ask students like how flexible minded they are in terms of like the schools they're looking at. And if you kind of want to make sure and cover bases for like all schools, like a huge wide range of even ones that maybe aren't test optional right now, then the benefit of taking it in the spring, if you have the time, energy, and space, is that it gets one kind of done, and then you can still take it a second time, in the summer or fall. If a student's more flexible and it's like, you know what, I'm pretty open, like I'm not so attached to like certain colleges and I'm very flexible and I kind of want to wait. That's kind of, I guess, strategy wise. I don't know if you want to add to that, either of you, but that's kind of the way I think a little bit.
No, I agree. I mean, I think it is, as students often in junior year haven't developed their full list of colleges and that might be shifting. I would say, if they have the bandwidth to do it conservatively, I would say it's still nice to access it in the spring because the pressure's lower for testing. And so often students, can go in a little bit more relaxed because they know they have a second opportunity in the fall to take it in time for early deadlines if they need that. And maybe they'll take it once and decide that, the schools they're applying to, they're not going to submit those scores, or they do want to take it again in the fall. But as John said earlier, I think it's important. We understand that this has been an unusual year. So, there will be opportunities in the early fall to take it if a student doesn't feel like they're able to do that this spring. So I think it's, personal decision, but it can't hurt to take it this spring if students feel ready and they'd like to do it when they have a little bit more time to get that baseline score back, and then potentially do some prepping to take it again if they need to have a score to submit in the fall.
And I think in terms of the question about like waiting in the fall, how late you can wait to take it, is it kind of depends again on the deadline. So if it's like applying early deadlines in November, then you may want to take it, by October, but then if it's a test optional school and you're applying for like November or something, sometimes you can type in there that you're taking it in November or something, and then you'll send the scores, you could always send them, right after, depending. So it's a little bit dependent on the colleges at that point, but because even if it's a January deadline, then you could even take it all the way up through December, and have them sent right away. I don't know that I would wait that late, but that could be an option. So
yeah, it usually takes about 2 to 3 weeks to get the scores back, and they're offered on Saturdays. Usually SATs are traditionally on the first Saturday and ACTs are on the second or third Saturday. So just kind of looking at the deadline and then going back 3 weeks just to be safe for like the final opportunity before it's due.
Yeah.
Gap year. So many of our students, especially this year, actually decided to take a gap year to for a variety of reasons. Some wanted to continue to explore interests as they, realized, hey, maybe I want to try something different, or work for a little while, or take advantage of some of the opportunities that they were able to, spend more time with their family, whatever that looks like. Looking forward, a lot of students, if travel opens up, that's been traditionally an experience that students that take gap years will take advantage of. Each school has a little bit of a different policy on what that looks like. So for a lot of our students, they'll want to apply with their cohort, with their class, to be able to get that experience, to know how the process works. But then also, they might have to end up reapplying. Some schools allow you to defer for a year, others want you to reapply. If your student does choose to take a gap year, we're still available to support them through the process. So thinking they would just at the beginning of that gap year, they would need to make sure they connect with us or be looking into the options for applications moving forward.
One thing too, I was going to say on gap year, and obviously this has changed some with everything over the last year, you know, because it's changed circumstances in a lot of different ways in terms of what gap years look like. So I think that is changed. But one thing to think about if you kind of know your son or daughter is sometimes if a student kind of thinks like, oh, I'll just take a gap year, but kind of like it says, they don't really have a thought of what they're going to do. And then a lot of their friends have plans or head off to college or different things like that, then it can lead to kind of this wrestling and kind of stressful time. So I think it's kind of depends on, and again, you know your son or daughter the best kind of, but having those conversations and the type of person they are, and how flexible that can look. But if they're kind of someone that needs some structure, then kind of talking through, okay, you want to do a gap year, let's like talk through what an actual plan would look like and what you actually want to do, and then let's set things in motion to put some things in place, you know, before you actually get to that point. So that's just my only other thing I'd say.
So I think since we're getting close to 7:30, we're going to go ahead and skip this. There's a little food for thought. We'll keep that in the slides when we send it out to you, but we want to jump to this just for a quick recap.
Okay, so spring right now, and the weather's been nice. So registration for course requests should be entered. So we've been tracking students down. So that's that piece. If there's any questions, and have them reach out to their counselor. Exploring planning, I think, is the biggest thing. We're going to send out that email to each student kind of just with resources. And again, it's not to like stress them out or overwhelm them right now with more, you know, so if they're not ready, we kind of say that in the email, but if they're not ready really to kind of look or pay attention to that now, at least they have that so they can refer back to that. And the high school and beyond plan, I was going to say that like the career interest inventory and the resume kind of our graduation requirements, which is kind of why we're having those 2 meetings. Martha Zender is going to have those, and we want students to come to those so they can kind of get those done and started and done. And then I think just the biggest key with junior year, you know, is continuing to engage in current classes, being involved in the sports and activities, and just kind of continue engaging and taking care of self and mental health and all those sort of things is just really important to kind of be ready, you know, like to have those, because that helps them obviously be ready to kind of have those discussions and think forward if they're kind of taking care of those things. If you have a student where you're concerned about their progress towards graduation, because we have talked about that, then please reach out to us, because we want to talk that through with them and you and just kind of come up with a really good plan. And summer school options will be coming out later this spring, usually after spring break. It might be a little bit, you know, it's just sometime after spring break. I was going to say too that I forgot to mention earlier, that's just important in terms of the college piece, is always check the school website for the most accurate info and kind of updates. And don't be shy. I always tell students, don't be shy to reach out like to college admission people, or reach out an email, or just ask, get the questions answered, you know, because basically them and you are consumers, like for finding the best fit and getting all the information needed to make a good decision. So that's, I guess, just the big thing I wanted to mention earlier too, in terms of whether it's visits in person as possible, virtual visits, getting info. So I guess that's the other piece. And then summer, hopefully people will be able to relax, sleep and play, self-care, continue exploring options, have those conversations in an enjoyable way, hopefully, and not like a high stress way. Like we said, do visits, sign up for fall if needed, testing if needed again. And some will, I think a big key is if a student's ready and motivated in the summer to kind of start working on college stuff, think a big thing is just getting organized, right? Like getting a resume created with all the stuff they've done in high school, and getting kind of a list, and with the colleges, and maybe even creating a spreadsheet with the deadlines, and pulling up, kind of some essay prompts. I mean, just things like that. And they can create their Common App account if they want. So again, there's students, if they're not ready in the summer, don't stress out over it, because the fall is perfectly fine too. But if they're kind of ready and motivated, those are some things they can do. And stay healthy and safe. We're here to help. That's our big thing always. So we want to be available, and reach out to us with any questions anytime.
Thanks, everybody. I know that was a lot of information and a long presentation, so we appreciate you hanging with us. And hopefully, if questions start to come up after this, feel free to email any of us, and we'll get, if there's some questions that we feel are good for the group, we'll email those out with the presentation, try and answer those with the presentation when we email that to you all. So if there are any other questions, have a wonderful evening. And we're excited to work with your to-be seniors and help them finish up their junior year. And take care.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks so much. Appreciate it.